Welcome to the Beyond Body podcast with your hosts, Mia and Holly. Join us for a sometimes fortnightly podcast
where we explore all things mental health, being a messy human, and how to get the most out of this one precious life.
And all the ridiculous stories in between. Hi everyone, just Mia jumping in at the top of this episode with a couple of things to mention. First and foremost, Holly and I have some very exciting news and a very rare opportunity which has opened up for the August retreat in Bali. So that'll be the next thing you hear and see before we get into the content of the episode. And the second thing to mention is just a very small trigger warning. We do briefly touch on suicide in this episode, but it is not the full content of the episode. If that is not a helpful thing for you to listen to, please feel free to come back at a later time. Thank you. Holly and I have something very exciting to share about our upcoming Bali retreat in August of 2025. One ticket has just become available to the retreat.
So if you have missed out on this retreat or you've missed out on a former retreat and you really want to come to one of our retreats, you could be escaping the Australian winter with us for 5 days. So every attendee that has come to one of our retreats, I would say their recovery has been propelled from this experience because they are about so much more than just recovery. They are about who you are going to be at the end of this, right? Not only who you are becoming through it, but who you are at the end of this journey.
And to come away with some unbelievable skills around embodiment, around help seeking, self-forgiveness, these beautiful things which are not just about getting well in recovery, but staying well long-term. That's one of our huge philosophies at Beyond Body, and particularly with these retreats. We wanted to create something which has never really existed to fill a gap of how do you turn this experience and these lessons into lifelong lessons and lifelong safety nets to keep you well.
So if you want a little dose of magic, put yourself first, do something for you, and come and hang out with us in Bali.
Welcome back to the Beyond Body podcast, everybody. We are so excited to be joined by a phenomenal guest today. This is Caz. Caz came to us as one of Holly's clients, but also we had the privilege of spending 5 incredible days with her in November of last year at one of our Beyond Body retreats, and she was such a beautiful addition and shared some of her journey with us, and we're here to share a little bit of her journey today. Caz, thank you so much for being with us.
So excited to be here.
So nice having a client on the podcast. Like I've never done this before. It's so special.
Is this the first, is it?
Well, it's not the first for me because Paul has been on mine, well, more so my channel as my client. So this is a bit full circle.
Isn't it? It's a bit full circle. I remember that. Gosh, I think you posted a video a little while ago, Mill. It was like some promo we might have been doing for a retreat, and there was like a snippet of that interview that I did with you then. And I was like, whoa, that was like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, that was what we posted after our beautiful retreat together in November with Caz there.
I love that.
Yeah. So, Caz, you got in touch with me recently because at the retreat we were having a bit of a discussion about our shared likely undiagnosed neurodivergence, and you were such an inspiration to me because that's a journey that I'm still very much at the start of. And you were embarking on the road to explore an autism diagnosis, which you have recently experienced. And like I said, you reached out to me with this beautiful piece of writing that you shared that we'll hopefully be able to link somewhere so people can go and read it. And we wanted to have you on to talk about that process because there's such an intersection here with eating disorders, ADHD, autism, neurodivergence across the board. We've got such an emerging understanding of how these two things play across, the two different diagnoses or multitude of diagnoses. So it was just such an opportunity to, get to have a chat with you, but also in your beautiful way to be able to let us into such a precious thing that you've recently experienced. So before we get into it, just thank you so much for being here and doing that with us.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you for that beautiful introduction because it is a precious thing. It's a very raw and vulnerable thing. And I'm still in the I only got the diagnosis, I think a couple of months ago. It's still quite fresh. I'll say that I'm speaking as a level 1 autism diagnosis, which means kind of, for me, it means very high masking, like I can show up in the world. It just costs me an enormous amount of effort in a lot of different ways that aren't necessarily seen. And it's the lowest support needs level of the autism spectrum. And so everyone's experience with autism is really different. This is just mine. I've also got a previous ADHD diagnosis as well. And so ADHD, I think, is the term that I'm sort of trying on for size, and that's sort of where it fits at the moment. But yeah, it is a precious time. It's been a lot. It's been a lot of processing that I hadn't expected since the diagnosis, and it's really nice to come and actually talk about it in this form. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think for you as well, Kaz, being a long-term client of mine and, me sort of being able to witness even some of the processing you were doing about this and the potential of having this diagnosis even before you went and did all the testing. I think, and we'll get into all of it, but yeah, it's been a really just beautiful process to witness your own understanding of yourself, how this has informed how you feel about yourself, your level of compassion, how you can show up for yourself, how you can show up for your kids, etc. So I think this is going to be a really, special episode that is going to make a lot of people feel seen because, for Mia and I, it's very unlikely that we would have a client that is mainly only struggling with an eating disorder, right? It's so common for people to be struggling with multiple things. And I think even for us as practitioners, it's so powerful to really understand different clients' experiences as well. So we can also show up for our world, our clients with as much information as possible.
Read this morning even, I think it's a third of people with eating disorders are neurodivergent. Like there's a huge intersection there, which I hadn't really realised until I went on my own journey of diagnosis. Like it's quite staggering actually.
Yeah, it's a huge percentage.
And that's why I think that, even, you sharing sort of, this is my experience with autism. You can't be everybody's experience. You can't be everybody's representation. And that's the true with eating disorders as well. But this has also personally been really powerful for me because I feel like there's such a relatability in terms of our ages and stages of life, etc. So when we were having those conversations, I was like, I've never looked at it through this lens before because there is such an intense sort of failure of women and girls in this area in particular. The criteria for autism is still based on boys and men. And so the need to mask and to just cope and survive and get through is so high because there just haven't been a lot of resources and there's not a lot of accessibility for women. And so, yeah, it's personally been a real eye-opener for me as far as maybe life doesn't need to feel quite as hard as it has sometimes.
You know what? That's exactly how I felt talking to you as well. To see someone in your position where you were sharing so generously your experiences relating to neurodiversity or suspected whatever, I felt so seen and like there's been a lot of shame in my life around how I think about particularly autism, not so much ADHD, autism, and I'm still going through it. There's a barrier of I've got a stigma or a shame associated with autism. Like I'm very conscious about who I talk to about it and tell, and it's something I want to completely obliterate within myself. But I think there's still something lagging in it. I think it's just a lack of education on what autism can actually look like, particularly in women, as you say, who we were just conditioned to mask like a girl of the 80s, like that's just what we do kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so my mom, when I was telling her that I suspected, she's like, you were fine, you were good. I'm like, yeah, I was good, I was compliant. You didn't see it because there was nothing to see. I was so good at masking, and it comes to no one's cost but your own because you're so exhausted all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, getting into a little bit of the specifics of what this has been like for you, what are some of those things that led you to seek out an assessment? Because that's obviously first step. And my understanding is it is a lengthy process and it's, something you really have to dedicate time and energy to. How did navigating that process feel like actually making the commitment to go out and explore whether or not this was a diagnosis which was relevant to you?
Yeah, that took years, I would say. And it was years of building up, second guessing myself, a lot of gaslighting of my own experiences. So I've always had sensory sensitivities. As a child, I would struggle with particularly noises. Breathing the same air as someone in a bedroom is horrific to me. It still is. Like I cannot sleep next to anyone. It drives me nuts. And I have to with children, and it's hard. But even as a kid, that was the case. And as I got older, it sort of became more apparent in my social relationships, social burnout, struggling to not necessarily make friends, but maintain friendships was really difficult for me. I'd be all in at the start, and then I'd just be so exhausted by the constant need to work at relationships and friendships. And I was like, nah, I just need to retreat. And so sensory overwhelm is at the moment how it kind of shows up mostly for me. At the end of the day, I feel like my nerves are on fire. I feel like every noise feels like nails on a chalkboard. My kids want to kind of give me a cuddle at the end of the night, and I don't want to reject them, but it feels, it's just you just recoil. It's your whole body's on fire, basically, is how it feels to me. So there's sensory, and there's also relational and emotional sensitivities that I've really struggled with. And it's been really hard to unpack what is what, particularly with the ADHD. There's a lot of almost contradicting aspects of both of those things. Like with the ADHD, there's a lot of impulsivity. There's a lot of dopamine seeking, which you can sort of see how feeds into the eating disordered world, which works. Yeah, that's how it sort of worked for me. And then the other side of it is sort of, being overstimulated while still craving stimulation. And it's that battle and balance of trying to find that, middle ground of regulation, which is my daily task.
Yeah. Wow, Kaz, it's so interesting even just hearing you talk about it, because it is, I think people are going to be listening to this and being like, that's me. That's exactly my experience. It's like literally me, right? And I think, even like through my own lens of being someone who is like quite typical, right?
Neurotypo, I love that.
Love it though. T-shirt.
I love the like neurotypo and neurospicy. I feel like they're the best. I feel like so many of my favorite people in the world are neurospicy. But understanding it sort of like through my own lens, it makes so much sense to me how this struggle to you, of course, is then going to feed into your eating disorder. I also think, Kaz, because just part of who you are and your general nature is that you're so empathetic, right? You are there for your children. It's really hard for you to prioritize yourself in your life. So I think also in doing this, in being like, yes, now this is the time I'm going to get this diagnosis, it also has been such an act of like, I am important, prioritizing yourself, which I then think has also positively informed your recovery. I think through that sort of lens, Kaz, how do you think your autism diagnosis has really shifted the way you understand your eating disorder and maybe also your past experiences?
Yeah, it's been nothing but positive. It's been so amazing in ways that I didn't expect. The diagnosis, I sort of went in thinking, okay, what do I expect to feel if I get a positive autism diagnosis? What do I expect to feel if they say you don't meet the criteria? How will I react to it? And I ended up just not knowing either way, so I just went into it. But for me, coming out of the diagnosis, there was a lot of emotional processing. I felt a really intense grief, which I hadn't expected to feel, and it was just a feeling. It wasn't anything that I really intellectually went through too deeply at the start. I just felt really sad. But that took about a few days of feeling really, really sad, and then a lot of sort of, looking back through a different lens, just, I kind of realize why I do this now, or that thing that happened back in the day, that makes sense. Or particularly in terms of the eating disorder, I'm sort of a long-term, I've struggled for many, many years. I'm 40, it's been over half my life. And there's been a lot of guilt and shame surrounding that. Like, why can't I just seem to recover quickly like other people seem to be able to? And it's allowed, the diagnosis in particular has been useful for me in allowing me to look at recovery through a more compassionate lens, because there's reasons why the eating disorder has been in my life such a prominent thing that I struggle with. Like, it helped me initially. It purported to help me regulate really extreme emotions that I couldn't regulate any other way. It helped me to, I guess, fit in when all I wanted to do as a masking little girl was to fit in with everyone else. And so I thought, if I can do this thing to look a certain way, I'll do that. There's benefits there, and the neural pathways were wired so deeply, and I used it as a support and a coping mechanism really for my undiagnosed neurodivergence. And it's really nice to come to a point where I don't need to use that anymore, and I don't have to look at it or myself so harshly, like it's a failure on my own personal part. It's like, well, no, it was highly informed by your neurodivergence, and that's okay. And my recovery might look a little bit different to other people's, or It might not, but that's just my journey and it's okay. I think that self-compassion piece is where the diagnosis has been so valuable for me.
Yeah, and also that self-forgiveness, it sounds like as
Mm.
well about, because I think everyone sort of gets told in recovery like you were doing the best that you can with what you're given at the time, which is so true. But I then think to really be able to feel that for yourself, it becomes your own experience. And that comes through getting all those extra little pieces of information about this is why I am the way I am. And like none of it is like good, bad, right, wrong. It literally just is. And from there, right? It is like, okay, well, this is why I was engaging in these behaviors. This is the way in which I learned to cope with the world. And I think it can even then put you in that position where you're like, okay, so a core part of your recovery is regulation, just day-to-day regulation to help you stay online so that you are able to practice the skills that you have to not engage in the behaviors. But to be able to do that, I feel like you almost needed this missing piece of the puzzle.
Yes, absolutely. I think diagnosis isn't for everyone. I think some people can self-diagnosis is absolutely valid. I feel like if you know type of thing. I've heard that neurotypical people don't spend hours and hours trawling through TikTok or and
Yes.
just and wonder if they're neurodiverse. Like I don't think neurotypical people tend to do that, but I just think if you know, you know, and I've always probably known. I think for me, it was a really important validation tool for myself. Um, and it was something that I wanted to do for myself. I think if there'd been any external pressures to do so or anything, it wouldn't have been so meaningful to me. It's something that I've always wanted to do, just to know, to have more information about my experience and myself. And like we said earlier, and for the purposes of that self-compassion and validation, like that's why I did it. I wanted to know more about myself in order to love myself more and to hopefully move through recovery now a lot stronger. And it has been so far a really strong motivator for positive recovery for me. It's been amazing, actually.
I think that this is so reflective of what is true in eating disorders, what is true in this neurodivergent process for people, which is the power and importance of language, and that it gives us this container where we can safely explore ourselves within. Whereas I remember even from through the lens of when I first started seeing my psychologist for my eating disorder. And when she first said to me, Mia, it makes all the sense in the world that you developed an eating disorder. It was kind of inevitable. Like, look at the path. And I was like, oh, yeah, it was kind of inevitable
Mm.
because this whole so beautifully said for a lot of people, not all, some people, their perfect storm is going to be this was a genetic predisposition and it got triggered by something physiological. For many more of us, it's a perfect storm of a number of things, and this can certainly be one of them for so many in an unknown way. Where the eating disorder is kind of the end point, right? But that's the thing that we go and seek treatment for. And then it's this sort of stepping backwards into the originating issues and the root system and the stuff underneath. And that's what I think the power and importance of this is that until you get to the bottom of the root system, you're very often just chopping the weeds off at the top. Whereas now, when you've got all that information in your hands and you can decide whether or not you're going to put it back in or you're going to plant something else, you can't do that unless somebody tells you what the bottom of the root system is.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's such a privilege for someone to do that too. It's so expensive to get diagnosed. It was over, was it $3,000? Like ridiculous
Oh,
amounts of money that not everyone has access to. And I know I'm not sure how it works with healthcare cards, and I think children are probably covered, but that's such a barrier for so many people. And
mm,
it it breaks my heart that there could be people who would get so much benefit from a diagnosis in whatever ways, or even NDIS funding if that's the route that you need to go down, and not be able to just because of financial reasons. There's a big,
mm.
it's a privilege to get diagnosed, which it shouldn't be.
Mm-mm.
That's
Absolutely
such a
not.
good point. That's such
Mm.
a good point, Kaz. And piggybacking off what Mia said there as well, I think you're so right. It's like, so many people come into recovery and they're like, all right, I want to get rid of these behaviors. And it's like, yeah, we will. But we need to first of all, to be able to create the environment where you have the best chance of not engaging in those behaviors. So we have to figure out what are the skills that you don't have here and why. And a huge part of that, of course, for a lot of people is going to be understanding why they function the way they do in the world. That could come to a diagnosis. For a lot of people, it's going to be going back and doing trauma therapy, like opening some really overwhelming Pandora's box. And even to be able to do that, obviously it requires so much bravery, but also accessibility. To be able to do that, to have space in your life where you feel like you even have capacity to dive into that work as well as the financial cost of it. It's really upsetting, I think, when you think about how much it requires for someone to be able to completely dive into their healing sometimes.
Totally. It's also with trauma. We see a lot of people with barriers to being able to access extra help to be able to move through their trauma, which we know is going to be a stepping stone to their continuing recovery. And it's all, yeah, treatment just has so much that it needs to be able to do, but we have to be able to give people the tools and the knowledge and the awareness. I often say it's so unfair how people are set up where they're like, why haven't you built the house yet? I gave you a hammer. Yeah, but where are the nails? Like, I can
Yeah.
show up every day and swing this thing at a wall, but unless you give me the other implement, the other thing that goes hand in hand with this, then how can we blame the person when we're not giving them everything they need, right? So, Kaz, in terms of the changes for you, in terms of how you view your identity, your sense of self, because obviously there's the understanding of your eating disorder, of recovery, but for you personally, sense of self, how you talk to yourself, how you see yourself in the world, how you see yourself in some of those relationships that previously have felt like such a challenge. What has changed for you in terms of your self view?
Lots. It's almost like the diagnosis changes absolutely nothing and it changes absolutely everything. It's like life goes on as normal, but then there's this undercurrent of accommodation and accessibility and understanding that is just there. And I don't have to even work that hard to tap into it. I'm noticing that since the diagnosis, I will get out my noise cancelling headphones of the night and I'll like tell the kids, because I've told the kids pretty openly, like, Mom's got autism. This is why sometimes she needs a bit of space and these are the headphones and blah. And I put them on and I'll sort of prioritize that and have boundaries around that more than I ever have before. And saying no to things. Like I'm such a people pleaser. It's a huge part of masking. And so I really struggle even with friendships to say no to things I might not want to do, or I tend to know that I'll be tired in the afternoons. And so I prefer to do morning things. And so learning to say no has been something that I'm trying on, and it's coming a bit easier with the diagnosis, which has been a really lovely kind of surprise. It's something I want to challenge myself to do better, to really say, no, I don't really want to do that. And that's enough. I don't have to explain myself or, go too deeply into it. But those things have been huge, along with that self-compassion that I talked about. And for me as well, there's a huge familial, it's very genetic to be neurodiverse. And so part of the reason I did get diagnosed was looking at my kids and sort of suspected traits, and should they ever go down that route of seeking a diagnosis, or if, as a family we decide to do something in terms of assessment with any of my kids, having that understanding and knowledge of myself can only, I think, be a good thing for them. It's a really motivating factor. So I guess what's changed is just my understanding of myself in my family, but also my motivations for creating a healthy and happy family have kind of shifted to really being conscious of neurodiversity and how it shows up in our lives. And it's a process. Like, we're still, a lot of nights end up in extreme dysregulation from all of us, and it's a shit fight and whatever, but we're, just having the language around it and the reparations, and even saying, okay, everything escalated, why did it escalate, and talking about it. That's been a big change, I would say, since the diagnosis.
I really think has your communication with your kids, you and your husband's communication with your kids, it's so evolved. Like, I think, your household, from what I know of it, you create so much space for everyone to have their emotions. And then you're so good at, if something happens or someone's upset or you're upset or whatever it might be, coming back together and like understanding it with your kids. And I think that is such a beautiful gift for your children, because, I would say that probably, like, I can say for my own upbringing, like, that just wasn't a common thing.
No.
Like, either they're like, let alone having space for emotions, and then there is big emotions, like being able to have the opportunity to understand them in a safe way. Like, it's just, I feel like, this next generation, like your kids' generation, will have that experience. And I think it was something that was so lacking in former, like, our generations. Whereas, like, it's just so beautiful that you can give that to your kids now.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful compliment, because I think a lot of my critical thinking does come through in my parenting. I sort of second guess myself a lot, and it's nice to hear that. So thank you. And it's something I do work hard on. And I think that's the difference between the last generation and this one is just the reparations and the awareness around it. But yeah, like you say, my parents certainly didn't have that. And hopefully my kids will just do even better. Like they'll figure out what we got wrong and I don't know.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
So, Kaz, what would you say to someone, say they like either they expect that they might be autistic or one of their children might be, but feels really afraid to like open up those conversations and explore it? What would you say to them?
I would say that I feel you. It's taken me 40 years to get to this point. And that's 40 years of a lot of self-doubt and struggling and feeling crappy about myself in a lot of different ways and burning out socially and feeling rejection, the sting of rejection so painfully or perceived rejection and all these different things. Like it's 40 years of that's not much fun. And so anyone who's sort of, I mean, 1 year of that's too much. So anyone remotely of any age who suspects, I think it's valid. It's you're not crazy or silly or looking for an excuse, which is all the things that I told myself. I was looking for an excuse as to why I was the way I was, but there's validity in your convictions and stand behind them. And I think, as I said before, like self-diagnosis, I think is a valid tool. It certainly helps me, like trawling through TikTok and being like, yep, that's me, that's me, that's me. And, informing myself was a huge part of the process. So lots of reading and talking to people who were neurodiverse and who were generous enough to share about it. That's a process and it takes time. At the retreat, I met another girl who had, I think, fairly recently been diagnosed as well with autism. And so talking to her was amazing. Talking to Mia at the retreat was amazing. I think it's sort of opened my eyes to the fact that autism and neurodiversity can be talked about. It's not something shameful. It's not something I have to hide. And so for people who feel afraid, I understand that fear so much, not just because of the barriers to getting diagnosed, but also what does a diagnosis mean for you? Or if they turn around and said, no, you're not this, but you feel that you are, which is a worry that I had as well. Will people treat me differently? That's been a huge worry. I don't want to be treated inferior or less than. And I think that's my biggest barrier to telling people that I'm on the spectrum. But for me, the benefits of getting diagnosed have been so positive. It's actually hard to think of a negative aspect to getting diagnosed for me. I can't. The only negative things for the diagnosis were that assessment in and of itself was quite tiring and exhausting. It was a day of the eye contact, which I think Mia and I,
yes,
it feels like having sex with someone if you're staring into their soul in their eyeball.
Especially at the cash register. I can practice it everywhere else, but at the cash register, I'm like, we're entering an intimate relationship, and I just want this bag of cakes. That's all I want. And now we're married, and we have to leave together. So this is incredibly uncomfortable. What's your name?
I know, it's awful, and I either go overboard or I'll like stare. Yes. Okay, don't. But think of all the energy you put into that when you're supposed to be having a conversation. Half or even more than half of your energy is going into my body. Like, let's be relaxed. Let's have eye contact. I'm not listening to what the person's saying. So that's a great example of the energy that it takes just to kind of deal with eye contact, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, even laughing about that is so wonderful. There's been actually a lot of humor since the diagnosis. Like I don't know, like I feel like relaxed with the way that I am, and like I'll joke about it with my husband, like, oh, that's just the autism, it's just autism type sort of stuff. And it's nice to have that levity. Like, you can afford it if you're that lucky, or if I'd just go for it. There's lots of supports out there. You're not alone, that's for sure. And yeah, it's been only positive for me.
Just as a side note, Caz, because I remember, I've always had this sense of being different and being sort of an outsider in some ways. And, when I tell people like I'm naturally quite introverted, and they're like, no, you're not. And I'm like, I'm just very well practiced at the 45 minutes where I've got enough gas in the tank to kind of perform my extroversion and my ability to keep eye contact and to be this like really upbeat kind of person. And then I like really need to go and replenish. And that was kind of one of my early clues. But it was actually in observing my dad, who in hindsight, obviously not with us anymore, and would never have gone down the path of diagnosis, etc., because he would have just said, this is just who I am. but he would disappear into projects, time blindness, would get very hyper fixated on things like special interests, which I really resonate with, my funny, weird little things that I just become totally obsessive over, time blindness, all those sorts of things. It was a couple of the commonalities I had with him that really made me start to put some curiosity out there that was a bit more specific, not just like I'm different and I feel like I'm a bit weird in certain settings. You mentioned things like scrolling through TikTok, etc. What do you think were some of those early moments where that language started to feel like it spoke to you? Was it observing it maybe in the people around you where you felt like there were similarities, or stumbling across it on social media? Like what would your early access points have been to going beyond what is this about me?
Yeah, I reckon it was 100% TikTok. I got a psychology degree, and I always thought, oh, I can't, I want to work with kids one day. I don't think I could work with autistic kids because I just don't understand autism. I don't get it. I've got no connection there.
Mhm.
Ironically, I knew nothing about it. I had so many stereotypes about what autism was. And it felt like this foreign, distant, non-interesting concept to me until I got diagnosed with ADHD. And then I started looking at the TikToks, and it was particularly the high masking later diagnosed women sort of sharing things that hidden signs of autism that you didn't think were autism. I'm like, oh my God, check, check, check. So for me, it was seeing myself in those women sharing their experience was so eye-opening because it actually informed me on what autism can show up as. And I had no idea. And that's with a psychology degree. I had no idea. Um,
Mm.
I thought it was literally little white boys obsessed with trains. And certainly that can be some people's experience, but it's definitely not everybody's experience. And yeah, it's quite shocking to me actually how little I knew about autism,
Mm.
my background, and what I worked in counselling with kids and things. And the lack of general knowledge that I had anyway was looking back quite astounding. Um,
Mm.
and so it was seeing myself in those content creators that was the way that I sort of thought, okay, maybe. And then I dove deeper and I looked into more research studies and all that. And then I started, like you say, with your father. I think my father, he suicided when I was 6. Trigger warning, sorry, I probably should have said that. But I strongly suspect he was neurodivergent and autistic. He sought solace with alcohol. And it's so sad to me that it's just like 40 years ago, just even then, like there was no people
Totally.
sort of diagnosis either
Yeah.
at all. And it's so sad. And it's just such a privilege to be in this time and day and age where it's so much more accessible. I just hope it keeps on like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the self-regulation stuff that just makes it all make so much sense. As I say to clients
Yeah.
often, especially when they're dealing with intersections like this or intersections with trauma or a multitude of those things, is your eating disorder might be irrational in its practice, but it's totally rational in terms of why it showed up and what at the
Mm.
core it's trying to do for you. Because sort of what we were speaking about earlier, it's the avoidance, right? It's the numbing, it's the sedation when you just desperately, and I totally resonate with that feeling of like in this ping pong of like, where's the middle? Like, where's the middle regulated bit? Like, where's the calm, neutral? When did those, I don't know what they're called, the silver ball things that you hit and then they swing back and
I'm
forth?
picturing it.
Yeah.
Pendulum?
Yes, that's
Pendulum balls.
100%. Yes, just a pendulum. That's exactly right. Um, mine often feels like there's no resting middle point and I'm constantly trying to like get it to rest and drag it to the middle. And so these things that come in, whether it is substance use or alcohol use, or it's an eating disorder, or it's self-harm, or it's a litany of these things, it's just someone's expression of trying to get back to that middle.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I think that we can have so much more compassion. I mean, I know that when I went through my eating disorder, all those ways in which people try to regulate that we so often demonize in our world, especially with things like eating disorders, substance use, alcohol use, they just make so much sense to me in terms of
Mm.
what somebody's trying to get themselves back to, which is just a neutral, calm zero.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of the compassion piece, right? Which is like, I understand the function now. I can make peace with the part of me that was just desperately trying to get back to a calm, peaceful place.
It's so
100%.
interesting, isn't it? I think because I think so many people don't realize that like behind the behaviors, behind like the pain that the behaviors are causing, ultimately your nervous system is actually just trying to find homeostasis. It thinks it's like we got to get back there. So the work of recovery, or even recovery from substance abuse as well as so many things, anything that's really maladaptive, behaviorally. It is actually going to be about teaching your nervous system this thing is the new safe. And to do that, that path, that's where there's so much discomfort because it will feel like it's wrong. It will feel like, but I'm doing the thing that, is safe for like everyone else, like eating a meal plan or, not engaging with this toxic behavior. But for me, it feels so wrong. And that's because you have to reteach your nervous system that this thing is the new safe, which is why recovery requires so much bravery and so much stepping in to, into the unknown and being like, what it kind of asks of you is like, I need to let go of this thing in hope of something better, but I don't yet know that better thing is going to actually feel good. So there's so much bravery in that. And I think, it's wild to think of like the commonalities between so many struggles that we just face as humanity collectively. Because, everyone always has their own things going on, right? And I think that this is just this congruent tether with so many people's different struggles. Because ultimately, eating disorder or not, neurodivergent or not, everyone's going to have to learn to regulate, and that's going to have to be a core skill that they use every single day in their lives. I say to clients all the time, everyone should and will be dysregulated every single day. Like whether it's you've stubbed your toe or you're going through a breakup or like you get your car bogged, like everyone's going to be dysregulated. But that path back to finding that homeostasis, like that's the magic. Like that is the work there.
Where'd you get the car bogged example from, Hol?
Everyone, I literally sent Mia a text this morning saying this is my situation, may or may not be there for the 11:30 podcast, and then
Photographic evidence. Car
photographic
stuck.
evidence. But we were here. We stormed in the door 5 minutes before the podcast. We were all smiles.
Amazing.
Superhero cannot be stopped. Lifted that car up out of that bog herself.
Absolutely not. I was like damsel capital D.
Oh.
I was like I had like eight.
Do it sometimes. You got to do it.
But back to you, Kaz. We're really interested to sort of know, since you sort of had the diagnosis, what kind of support or language do you think has actually been the most helpful from people in your life? And also maybe what has not been helpful?
Yeah, that's a really great question because I've experienced a whole range of reactions from the few people that I have sort of shared. Like the best reactions I've had or the most useful to me have been just support and interest. My mum, yeah, she's a bit baffled by it all, but she was like texting me on the day, like, oh, I'm so anxious to hear how you go and let me know. And just her interest in it was so meaningful to me. Where I've had other family members who don't believe in diagnoses and have no issues with telling me why I shouldn't have gone for it and quite critical of the whole thing. They're sort of saying you're paying for a diagnosis, so what do you expect? Of course, they're going to say you've got it, and really harsh criticisms, which I sort of have to brush off and think, okay, that's your opinion. It doesn't really have to affect me. I'd say they are the negative kind of responses. And also, I think just indifference. Like I think some people don't know how to react. Like we're all a bit shit at saying the right thing at the right time. And I don't think there is any right thing to say. But telling my close friends fairly recently, they all had like their little, thing on it was on a message thread, and there was lovely little things to say. And you could tell half of them didn't know what to say, but they tried anyway. And I thought that was so cute and beautiful. So just support and interest for me has been really helpful. I do have a close friend who wrote me a beautiful message, which I wrote down because it was so lovely. And I can read a bit of it if you like. It was just like I don't know, like an instruction manual on how to react to someone who tells you they're autistic. And there's a lot of paraphrasing, but she said that is huge news and a lot of processing for you to do. There's a lot that surrounds that, no matter how prepared we think we are for something. The reality can be really different, and please let me know if there's anything I can ever do to support you in a certain way, or if I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing. And I'm like, oh, you just need to go into psychology or something. Like she had such a beautiful response. So that's been really lovely. And this, I haven't really told a lot of people, but I have the piece of writing that Mia mentioned earlier. It's getting published on, there's this US website called Attitude, like ADD Itude, and that's a website run by a WebMD that focuses on ADHD in particular, but they're publishing it hopefully this month. So if I can get that out there, I guess that's my way of kind of sharing it with people, and feel a bit nervous about that too. But yeah, I'm also proud. Like I'm
Yeah.
proud of my brain and yeah,
Yeah.
proud to share it. So I think what I've tried to do mainly in terms of your question is not let people's, whatever their response is, that's kind of their business a little bit. Like I didn't really do it for them. I think if I had been any less along with recovery or even any younger, I would have really struggled with what people thought of me, and I would have really relied on receiving certain responses to validate my experience, and would have been quite crushed if I hadn't received what I thought I deserved or expected. And now I have less energy streams to give out, and that's kind of a nice feeling. It's yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but that's how it's been for me.
Totally. And it highlights the generosity and necessity of lived experience across so many of these things that we have the privilege of being able to talk about. And it is a privilege to be able to talk about it because, as you say, there's accessibility to help and support that maybe isn't available to everyone, but there is a real generosity too to opening up your experience and sharing it with others. And it's got such a domino effect, right? Like you found those creators who were generous enough to share their experience that felt familiar to you. And now you pick up that baton, and here today you're doing that for others. And it's like, the chain goes back to me from Carolyn Costin of her sharing her experience and then making things accessible to me that wouldn't have been accessible, even just by virtue of language and her lived experience. So there's real privilege there, but there's also a lot of care that we have to take for ourselves when we are digging into the wells of our own personal experience and histories, and to remind ourselves that we are doing a very, very generous, precious thing.
And vulnerable thing. Like I think the one thing at the retreat that I went to in November with you guys, I think my biggest goal there was to be vulnerable because I'd never really unmasked in any way before. And that was my first experience of actually doing that and sharing with this beautiful group of women some really hard things, but also how I really felt about things. And it was a really scary thing to try out. And it was so beneficial because I think it's meant that it gave me so much evidence that you can do that. You can share parts of yourself that you choose to share, and it can benefit others. Like my first foray or venture into recovery was watching your video now, like one of your videos. You were the first thing I ever saw about recovery. And now I'm talking to you on a podcast, and it gives me chills. Like when you say, Holly did the same thing, and then with Carolyn Costin for you, like I love that so much, that passing of the baton. It's something I'm so fascinated by. And when I achieve full recovery, I really want to work in the space of neurodiversity, eating disorders, and that intersectionality. It's so interesting to me. I'm not really a special interest kind of autistic person, but I think that might be one of them. Yeah.
Just on that as well, Kaz, I think particularly when you came to the retreat, the big main goal was unmask, be yourself, be your authentic self, and just accept that version of you. If it's emotional or it's laughing or it's tired or like whatever, that representation is in that moment of time. And I think one of your key takeaways from the retreat was you said you had never felt so regulated. Like in those
Yeah.
5 days, you never felt so regulated, right? Which is really that sign that your nervous system, when it's like the masks are down, you actually just have space to be you. The container feels safe for you to be able to do that, that you are actually able to access that feeling of homeostasis. I'm balanced, I'm grounded, the pendulum has stopped, which is so special, right? To get that evidence and then be like, okay, what I'm always trying to get back to. And I think, your recovery evolution has been so beautiful to witness. But I think even, just having you speak here so eloquently, so openly, with so much vulnerability about your experience is so special. Because I think, this diagnosis, even getting on the podcast, it can be really one of those moments where you can stop and reflect on all the growth that you have made so far to this point. Because I think the future is becoming a lot more clear and there's so much more clarity of what it's going to look like for you moving forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think often that's what our sessions are like as well. It's the time for me to sort of stop and process and really think and give space to all these things, which I think is, we all have really busy lives. And particularly as a mum of three, I rarely get to do that. And so it's so nice to sit down and actually talk about something so meaningful to me, but also in that space that I feel comfortable and that I can share. And that's what that does amaze me about the retreat, is the fact that I achieved that regulation that you just spoke about in a house full of women, when to me that would be my instinct to be like, oh my God, how horrific. I just need to be alone and isolated. And it's so amazing to me that I could achieve that in that scenario, not in spite of it, but because of it. It was, amazing.
Yeah, that safe container of like just shared understanding and being
Yeah.
able to just drop everything. Because I mean, we experienced that too in those environments where I'm like, I'm with my people, like
Mm,
that we just have this shared language and shared understanding in all these different ways that we know we do on the eating disorder front. And then as the days go by, we're like, oh my God, there's all this other stuff that we have
yeah.
in common. And it was so interesting with that group. That was actually a really shared goal, was like wanting to be vulnerable and wanting to drop the ball and wanting to open up. And I think that it was one of the most probably bonded, vulnerable, groups. When you were all getting up in the morning, I was like, where are they going in the morning? They were all running, like getting down to North End Mollywood Beach. And November is not a warm time of
It was
year
cold.
to be throwing yourself in that water at that time in particular. And you were all going down together, and day by day, more and more people joining to go and do that morning swim at the beach, which was like, how vulnerable is just that, let alone
Mm.
everything that was shared amongst that group. Just incredible that that was the shared goal. And I think it was, yeah, one of the most bonded groups as far as vulnerability. It was beautiful.
Absolutely, because I think there's
So,
that beautiful thing that happens when someone, offers themselves and is vulnerable. It almost like gives it like, well, here I am, so it's now safe for you to do the same thing.
Mm.
I think, yeah,
yeah.
that's absolutely what happened on that retreat. I mean, all the retreats are super, super special, but that one was, I mean, as we literally say special, they're all super,
Pretty
super
special. So, Kaz, thank you so much for this very, very generous share today. It is undoubtedly going to have such an impact, and even could be that first entry point for somebody who's had similar experiences, not quite understanding where to put all of this. And this
Mm.
might get them on the path of some clarity and compassion as well. So, on behalf of us and everybody listening, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This has been so lovely.